Right.
Hey, LA Progressive friends and family. This is Sharon Kyle sitting here with my husband, Dick Price. We're the co-founders of LAProgressive.com, and we're delighted to have with us today Peter Larman. And Peter Larman is a regular writer, contributor to the LA Progressive, and he has written a really important piece today that he has titled Who Belongs? Why the USA Leads in Exclusionism. And Peter is a retired minister who formerly led Progressive Christians Uniting in Los Angeles, and he's a member of the National Council of Elders. Peter, thank you so much for contributing this really important piece because it brings to the fore what we are seeing as we look at the daily, the daily announcements coming out of this Trump administration.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be with you again. And wonderful to be with you again. I thought that you might ask me right off the bat, Peter Larman, why are you such an old sourpuss? A couple of my friends who knew I was writing this said, "You really want to say that? It's kind of, they use the term dark. It's kind of dark." Well, it is kind of dark because the history is dark. I'm trying to say here that the basis of the exclusionism and the cruelty goes all the way back to Christian supremacy, but there are a lot of twists and turns along the way. And I must say I was significantly inspired by a book that I read on that topic of whiteness and Christian supremacy in relation to anti-Semitism and anti-Blackness.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, so cruelty. I mean, there does seem to be a glorification actually out of the Trump administration on making one cruel threat after another. We may be abhorred by the fact that 4 or 5 masked thugs beat a Mexican-American gardener to the ground, punched him in the head, a small man, the father of 3 Marines. But we're appalled. But I don't think the Trump administration, I think they say that's the message that they want to send, that we are, and it relates to what your article talks about white supremacy. They can say that they're going after criminals and so forth, but we know that's not true. They're just sweeping up any Latino, Black person they can catch, that they can throw in the back of a truck and send to South Sudan. But you say, I mean, this is not so exceptional as we'd like to think. That this sort of cruelty and this white supremacy, white Christian supremacy, is embedded deep in Americans' history, right?
Sure. I mean, I think everybody knows about what we call settler colonialism, the mass extermination of indigenous people in order to clear the land so that there would be opportunity to grow commodities using enslaved labor. Those two things worked together. And then there was all of this, and I go into this in the article, all of this anxiety about, well, we understand slavery, that's built into our system, but what about these free people of color, free African Americans? They're a problem, right? Because they've got to be, we can't give them citizenship. And if emancipation and manumissions proceed, we're in danger of having a whole alien, that's the term they used, alien group, people who are obviously not qualified to be citizens in our midst. And then you all, of course, know about the rise of Jim Crow, the early withdrawal of federal support for Reconstruction, and the terrorism and the killing, awful killings. Nobody held accountable at all. And then the spasms of lynchings. And in the early 20th century, all these white riots, the end of the 19th century, white people attacking Black people randomly in Wilmington, North Carolina, basically destroying it. And then, everybody knows about Tulsa, but, these are the ones that people know about. There was a lot more of that stuff constantly. Terrorism is the word for it. Terrorism, night riders, And of course, the lynching, something like, I think the number is 6,000 people lynched as a public spectacle, spectacle. People celebrated this. They went to these, they treated them like picnics.
Right.
Absolutely. And there are postcards that survive till today that where you can see people actually brought in their children to witness these heinous brutality against Black people, predominantly men, but also some women. And it's just unfathomable to me that you would take a child to witness that and then celebrate it as if this is something that is worth celebrating. And
Yeah.
I
And the
go ahead.
postcards would say had a good time today
Yeah.
at the lynching.
It's
Now,
just
mind you, these are the same people who are going to revival meetings,
thank you.
Christian revival meetings, right?
Yes,
Right.
that's right. And so there's a reason that books are banned now. They're attempting to ban books, and they don't really want to teach the full history of full American history because they want to hold on to this American exceptionalism, which is why I so much appreciate what you've done with this piece, Peter, because people are saying that what we're seeing today with Donald Trump and the whole Trump administration. Like, for example, we were kind of talking about how a couple of days ago, the Department of Justice found that the police officer who murdered Breonna Taylor was guilty, and that police officer is being sentenced today, but the Department of Justice under the Trump administration has recommended that the sentence be 1 day. Hearing that, and by the way, I heard that on Tavis Smiley's podcast. Anybody who listens to podcasts, or if you don't listen to podcasts, you can go to Apple Podcasts, you can go to any of your podcasts and just search for Tavis Smiley. And he does 3 hours, fantastic. And so I learned that on Tavis Smiley's. Talk to me about how this minimizing of the lives of Black and brown people is nothing new. I mean, you've laid out some things, but talk to me about why it was so important for you to bring that up and to write this piece.
Well, I'm actually mainly concerned. I want to answer your question a little bit indirectly, but I'm going to answer it. I'm mainly concerned about the people, I call them the bright-siders, who want to say, well, this is actually unprecedented, abnormal, and it would just win the midterms or something, and everything will be back to normal. And I really, really want to interrogate that, because that kind of taking things too lightly is, in my way of thinking, almost as dangerous. It's even a form of collusion with the brutality. It's trying to look the other way. Interestingly, this story out of Kentucky is barely breaking the news. I mean, I think African Americans pretty much are paying intense attention to it, but I think most of the white people are like, well, that's just one small thing in this whole panoply of bad things happening. But don't worry, because the pendulum swings back. And I was thinking of my generation, and Dick, your generation too. We kind of grew up with this idea that everything's gonna work out. Do you remember in the middle of the 20th century, the political theorist Daniel Bell, people like that, J.K. Galbraith would say, well, we've got a great system here. It's very stable democracy. We've got a balance of power between corporations and unions. And sociologists kind of said the same thing. It was like trying to pretend that we didn't have these corpses under the floorboards, or that they would never somehow come back. And then, we had the Vietnam War, but even then, people said, well, it was a mistake, but it wasn't a mistake because it was immoral. It was a mistake because it was unwinnable strategically. There's a big difference there. And so now we still have what I call big money Democrats and liberals, well-paid people who are wanting us to believe that we're going to get it back. It's just a matter of time. in fact, some Democratic spinmeisters have said, let them hang themselves, let them, they'll destroy themselves. Well, they're going to destroy a heck of a lot more than their political prospects. And let's never forget, they're saying they will restrict democracy to whatever level it needs to be restricted in order to see to it that they don't lose power. Now, that part is maybe a little bit unprecedented, but then again, if you look closely enough, you'll see various ways in which, notably the Confederate States of the Americas, finding ways to restrict, shall we say, participation. So I don't know. I mean, I read Andrew Coburn's thing in this month's Harper's. He really does a fine job of saying how beholden the Democratic establishment is to these very well-paid consultants. They think if they do a little wordsmithing, that the results are going to change. I think it's naive, it's superficial, and I think it's dangerous.
Yeah, so I'd like to go back to one little comment you made. I recall when I came back from Vietnam, I found myself in large crowds of people who thought the Vietnam War was deeply immoral. Yes, certainly the leaders who wanted to excuse themselves said we had to get out because it was unwinnable. And I think of that because one of the saddest days in my life, perhaps a very sad day in my life, was when we bombed Baghdad. And all the newscasters and all the politicians were cheering and thought this was wonderful things and we're burning down this city. And I thought, did we not learn one fucking thing from Vietnam? Another point I wanted to make, I mean, so I am your generation, and for much of my life, I thought when I heard about lynching and the destruction of the burning of the Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and these horrible things, I thought, well, those are the past, and we're kind of beyond that. And I think in 6 months into the Trump administration, one virtue of it is we're not the least bit beyond any of it. The same cruelty, the same disregard, the same white supremacy is there as strong as it ever was. And now it's revealed in a way perhaps we weren't seeing it for a while.
Right. And I focus on two senses of belonging: citizenship, which is an important, concept that was debated about who can be a citizen in the United States. I mentioned this business in Missouri in 1820, where, well, I mean, free Black people not only can't be citizens, but they can't even come in to Missouri, and they got away with that. Missouri, take your pick. Yeah, but also belonging, just in terms of civic belonging, separate from citizenship. Neither is welcome to these Trumpian people. They're involved in ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing is not too mild, too strong, rather, a term to use. And in the 1850s, we had the Know Nothing Party, who were very much riled up about the immigrant influx at that time, and they couldn't decide whether they were more alarmed by free Black people or by Irish people, right? Neither one met their idea of who can be an American. They use the term Anglo-Saxonism. That's not something that we have made up in the 21st century. That was their term for the stock that they thought could qualify to be fully American.
So, Peter, speaking as a retired minister,
yeah,
what they call themselves Christian nationalists,
yeah.
But what theology are they standing on when they take these positions?
Well, here again, I think is where Magda Peter's kind of helpful. So she does this elaborate interpretation of what's called supersessionism, the idea that Christians replace the Jews as the objects of God's special favor. That was there. You can see that in the Christian scriptures. You can see it in the early church. You can definitely see it in the writings of Saint Augustine, who said, again, quoting these biblical things from the Old Testament, the younger shall serve the older. God elects whom God will elect. So the anti-Judaism, which is really a better term than anti-Semitism, the hatred of the Jewish faith, grew out of that, and along with it, the anti-Semitism. And then once the Europeans became world bestriding colonists, when they were exposed to Africa, they applied that same thinking to Africans. First the Portuguese, and then all the rest of them. And then, as I write, it was really the English and the Dutch who perfected the dehumanization of Africans, so that Africans were now purely chattel. And for them, the black skin automatically signified subservience and subjugation. Whether you were free or enslaved didn't really matter. That's of course where this problem of free people of color came in. Now, the white Christian nationalists today would deny, of course, they're very, they would do backflips to tell you how inclusive they are and how they've got people of color in leadership and so forth. But that underlying idea of who really belongs is undoubtedly still there, because they support these policies. They support the deportations, the detentions, all the rest of it, the alligator, Alcatraz, and now I'm reading, I think you are too, the old Alcatraz in San Francisco Bay. They're like, yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Oh boy, yeah, we find ourselves really in a pickle, and I think the reason that we're part of the reason, and many reasons, but part of the reason is because we really don't know our history. I was watching the other night a documentary about Hannah Arendt, and the documentary they could have produced the same documentary about what is happening today. Her documentary was about what was happening in Germany right before World War II. But they could have written that same documentary about what's happening in the United States today, the banning of books, the attacks on the universities, all of the things that we're seeing, the demonization of immigration. The migrants initially in Germany were just, initially they were welcome, and then they were treated like dirt. And then we see how it got progressively more brutal until we ended up with the Holocaust. So we're on that same track.
We are. I was just noticing today, I'm a little behind on my news consumption, but Harvard University, which has put on this brave front that they're fighting, they're suing back and so forth, and they are at one level. But in the meantime, they're giving Trump and Stephen Miller kind of what they want on the side. And they're saying, well, we wanted to do this anyway. We wanted to eliminate all references to DEI and African American studies and so forth. It's all gone. I mean, they've eliminated entire centers of research and scholarship, and they just said now we have a Center for Community Excellence. Right. And I think a lot of the other elite universities are doing. In other words, this is once again the preemptive surrender, and it's sickening, because when it's gone, it'll be a long, long time before it comes back, because the fear factor. I say a lot in this article about the Constitution, and I fear that next year, the commemoration year of the Declaration of Independence and all that stuff is going to. We already know that Ken Burns is bringing out a special thing, and it's going to be. You can hear this, the hymns in the background. You can the voiceover, reverent voiceover. Right. They'll be they'll be in the National Archives, panning these documents and sacred scripture. That's what some historians have called the Constitution. And what's fascinating to me when I looked at Sharon, you're a lawyer and you know about these cases. When I looked at what Roger Taney, the Chief Justice, wrote in the Dred Scott decision in 1857, he hit the language he uses about about the Constitution's exclusion of Black people, very, very candid language about, oh no, they never intended that, is exactly the language that William Lloyd Garrison was using on the other side when he called the Constitution a compact with hell. Well, a covenant with death and a compact with hell. Well, which was correct? Garrison was correct. I mean, we used to agree that Garrison was correct, right?
Mhm.
That Roger B. Taney's views. But if you gave Samuel Alito a glass of wine and asked him what he thinks of Dred Scott, he'd probably say, we ought to take a look at that. That wasn't so bad.
No, I think
I'm
you're
not exaggerating. I am not exaggerating.
I don't think you're exaggerating it, and I believe you, and I have always believed that. We've talked about how Derek Bell, the famed law professor, who I think you knew personally, Peter.
I knew him, and I think of him almost every day, and I can't imagine what he would be thinking at this hour. But go ahead.
He coined the term contradiction closing case.
Right.
And I love that term. It's difficult to remember, but what it means is a contradiction closing case is an event, a decision, or a symbolic action that is performed. It's performed in order to neutralize internal inconsistencies or tension within our dominant system. Our system is like democracy versus racism. These things cannot be, they cannot coexist. So we do things like have the Supreme Court, 1954 Supreme Court decision in Brown v. Board of Education. He called that a contradiction closing case. The purpose of it was to reduce the tension, make it kind of seem like, okay, we got this whole segregation in school situation underhand now. Nothing to see
Under
here.
control. Yep.
It's all
Yep.
under control, nothing to see
Yep.
here. The contradiction closing case is nothing but a performance. It appears to resolve a societal contradiction without addressing its root causes. And that's what we consistently do here in the United States. We'll do a big show of, oh, we fixed that, but we never get to the root causes. And so as a result, we still have the same issues popping up like whack-a-mole.
Absolutely right, Sharon. Absolutely right. And I remember Eric well as a person, and I remember that some of his legal colleagues would kind of mock him a little bit because he also wrote these parables, these sort of fictions, but they weren't fictions. He was saying what I think African American visionaries have always said. Always, they refuse the lie. I'll speak of you, Sharon. You refuse the lie of this is a normal, civil, inclusive society, intends to be an inclusive society. Absolutely refuse it. I mean, and now I don't really watch a lot of this stuff. I did watch Get Out, but I read about it. And again, African American visionaries, young artists, are creating this whole genre of Black horror, which is actually showing us who we are. It's not creatures from Mars. It's the white people. Sorry.
Yeah, it is. It is. And there are white people. So Dick and I belong to an organization called Coming to the Table. I may have mentioned this to you before. Coming to the Table is an organization that is designed to bring the descendants of the formerly enslaved together with the descendants of enslaved.
Right.
Develop relationships to understand how this country is so far off from what it purports to be, and to work toward racial healing. And we were together this weekend, and we meet once a month. I'm on the steering committee, and I forget why I brought this up. I was saying, because in our meeting this weekend, we were talking about nice white people. And my husband, he's a nice white person. But nice white people can sometimes, in their niceness and in their desire to have this beautiful America, they can overlook what is really happening. And it's so incumbent upon us who are rooted in the injustices to bring this up as often as possible, because we all will suffer what's happening to Black people, to brown people, will ultimately happen to all people who don't have power.
You're right. And next year, I want to bring it back to next year. Next year, people like you and me and Dick and people who actually take history seriously are going to be shouted down. Why are we going to be shouted down? Why is it worth their effort to stamp out this kind of thinking and this kind of writing as best they can, put a sanitized curriculum in the schools and so forth? Because they understand that if you can control the historic narrative and write a whole history. I mean, Hitler did it, right? Mussolini did it. Every tyrant has written their own history, right? Ignoring the actual history. That's what we face. That's what this is about. That's why the stakes are high. It's not an idle reading history and taking it seriously. It's not an idle activity. It's a high stakes activity. They know it. We should know it too.
Yeah, so one thing you said, I mean, among the talking heads, among the liberal politicians, centrist Democrats, you do hear the theme that, well, if we can just focus on the midterms, if we just take back Congress, we'll stop Trump. But that's not really the history of the world. I mean, Franco and Perón and Argentina and various people have taken over countries and stayed in power for a long time. Now, Trump with his cankles might not be able to carry the flag forever, but he's training a whole bunch of people who know his techniques. They may not have quite the same personality, but they'll have all the power. And now they'll have $190 billion ICE army to enforce their will on people. I think it's just as dangerous a time, far more dangerous really than Vietnam, where people weren't really wanting to invade Asia. It's a tough time right now.
Yeah, there's in some ways there's too much to pay attention to, but we got to keep our eyes on the main focus. And you mentioned the Democratic, I call it whistling in the dark about the midterms. Some of the candidates that they have the highest hopes for are take positions that grant that just surrender a whole lot of territory to the Trump point of view. I've been reading about this Spanberger person that's I mean, look at the positions and you're like, what? What? I mean, we don't have, I refer to the other wing of the ruling party. We don't have an opposition party. We've not had one for a long time. When it comes to corporate prerogatives, it's easy for corporations to say we never liked DEI anyway, so they're fine. That's gone. That's not a big ask.
Yeah, you would think Spanberger would have the great liberal ideology after her training as a CIA agent. I mean,
Yeah.
she's the right person for the job.
Yep. Well, we're not going to depress ourselves because I told my friends in writing this, I said, I haven't given up on revolution. I haven't given up on transformation. I haven't, it would really be the path of madness not to believe that there can't still be what King called excuse me, the radical revolution of values. That can happen. I just don't think to expect the system, our system, to produce it is at all realistic. And that's why when the keepers of the mainstream, the Schumers and so forth, say, well, just shut up and let us. We're the professionals. I think, yeah, you're the political professionals, and you've got these consultants that rake in millions of dollars. What have you what do you got to show for it? Realistically, what have you got to show for it?
That's right. So you mentioned in your piece that the United States has never really been revolutionary. Even the American Revolution was not a revolution. What we had was a core group of rich white property owning men who wanted to take control of a colony that was ruled by rich white royalty. So there was really no major change there, except that the people in control were residing in the colonies. So what we do need is a real revolution so that we can become the country that we say we are, which is a multi-ethnic, multiracial, multi-religious, coming together and ruling democratically. I appreciate your piece, and I do have hope for this, because as bad as things are, Peter, I get a sense that people are paying attention more to politics more today than they ever have in my lifetime.
Right. And I think the kinds of things we've been discussing today have more receptivity than they have had for a long time. I mean, that's why there is, in fact, an insurgency around the fringes of the Democratic Party. People saying, well, we're gonna make our own if we have to. I'm not just the guy in New York. I can't say it right.
Naughty. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm tripping on it. But yeah, I mean, of course, they want to destroy him. Some people want to destroy him, but yeah, I mean, that's happening. It's not just happening there. It's happening elsewhere. It's
That's
even
right.
happening here in Rhode Island.
And so we have to encourage those people and support those people. Is there anything else you want to say before we say goodbye to Peter?
Well, I always love talking to Peter. I'm sorry you're on the wrong coast, but it's good to get together with you this way.
He's on the right coast. We're on the left coast.
That's true.
I
Thank
miss
you,
you
Peter.
guys. I miss you guys. It's great to see all these creative new partnerships you're doing. It's and again, the fact that people turn to LA Progressive as a resource is another indication that people are taking things seriously indeed.
Thank you, Peter. We so appreciate your contributions. All right. Well, it's been a joy. We'll see you soon. And we got to
Thank
get back
you.
to work.
Stay cool.
All righty.
Bye.
Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below, and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.